Hello, my name is Sophie, and I'm one of the assistant directors for Pine Ridge Review, and I'm here with Michaela, another assistant director, and the lovely Hannah Miller.
Hi,
Hi, everyone.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just saying hello. I love this. I love doing Zoom conversations. They're so fun.
After 2 years, it still never is quite as seamless as you want it to be.
You go ahead, Michaela.
I'm Michaela. I'm also an assistant director at Pine Ridge Review, and we're here interviewing Hannah.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being able to sit down with both of you. And having been in your position, it's kind of weird to be on the other side of it, but I will do my best. And just a quick intro of myself. I was also a former assistant director at Pine Ridge Review while I was doing my undergrad at the University of Arizona. But now I am an editorial assistant at FSG Books for Young Readers, which is a children's imprint at Macmillan. And I just started that job in March. I was an intern in January, and then kind of the opportunity just presented itself for me to stay on full time. So that's what I'm doing right now. I support to the editorial director as well as another senior level editor as well. So that's kind of what I do in my job in short. And I just want to preface everything that I'm about to say in the interview with I'm very new to the industry. So definitely don't take my word as like law, because I'm still learning and figuring things out. So I'll do my best to answer your questions, but just know that I'm still a very fresh-faced person to this job.
Awesome. Okay, well, we'll jump right into the first little section of questions we have. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about your love of literature and like what drew you into YA/middle grade/picture books specifically, and like what drew you into those kinds of genres of reading.
Yeah, so I think at the core of it, it's that the books we read as kids influence us in such a deep way. And I know that sounds cheesy, but I was in a bookstore the other day and I saw these two kids browsing the middle grade section. And they just went back and forth, saying to each other, like, oh, we read this one, it's so good, or I really need to try this one, and tell me what you think about the ending because it's such a cliffhanger. And just listening to them talk about their favorite books, it reminded me that there's nothing like that experience as a kid, and that every child really deserves to have that experience as early and as often as possible. I remember being a kid and reading the Percy Jackson books as they were coming out, and that series was something that helped me connect with other kids. And to this day, it helps me connect with other people. So it just goes to show how stories can bring us together and make us feel less alone, which I think is just a very important human experience.
Awesome, that's awesome. And now we have a little bit of a tricky question. What is your favorite book/books? And I know that's very hard to choose, but maybe you could talk a little bit about maybe what you're reading now.
It's the dreaded question for sure. I'm gonna try to limit myself because I could definitely talk about this all day. I love The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. I read that series in either physical or audiobook form at least once a year. It's fantastic, and I always find new tidbits every reread. There's so much foreshadowing, so much good character work. So that's definitely a comfort read for me for sure. Another at the top of my list is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. It's a series I wish I'd had as a kid. And the show is just fantastic. I've already watched it. I know it came out yesterday, but it is amazing. So everybody needs to stop what they're doing and go watch that now. I'll also throw in Darius the Grey is Not Okay by Adib Khorram. I read that book in one sitting and it changed my life and how I view my own mental health. And yeah, so that book is just fantastic. Great cover as well, great title. Everything about that book is lovely. And I'll just throw in a picture book that I love too, which is After the Fall by Dan Santat. And I never thought a picture book could make me cry. And then I read that book. So if you want to be transformed as a person in like 40 pages, I would definitely pick that one up and read the rest of his stuff because it's all great.
Awesome. Those are really great options. I've heard a lot about the Heartstopper series and I'm ready to watch it. So that's really exciting that you liked it.
perfect. It is going up there with like the Hunger Games for me in terms of like really good book to screen adaptations. Yeah, fantastic. But we could go on a whole tangent about that. So like I have to like pull myself back.
Fair enough.
That's awesome. Alrighty, for the next question, any current favorite reads, like something you're reading now that you're really enjoying, or anything that you've read pretty recently?
I'll do rapid fire. Again, I could go on forever. Legendborn by Tracy Dion. The second book is coming out, so definitely catch up on that before it does. Nevermore by Jessica Townsend. Same thing. The fourth book is coming out this year. Himawari House, if you like graphic novels. That one's by Harmony Becker. And From the Desk of Zoe Washington by Janae Marks. I would recommend the audiobook. It's really, really great. But honestly, there are too many to name, but those are some that come to mind.
Awesome, awesome. Alrighty, and for the next question, can you pinpoint any specific experience that made you want to work in literature? And this can be from any point in your life or anything recently or anything that you've kind of been through that really drew you to reading/writing.
Yeah, totally. I'd say that it wasn't so much a specific experience so much as it was the lack of, and I'll explain that. What I mean is it wasn't until my senior year when I read a YA book that had a queer character in it. And it wasn't until college that I read a YA book that had a non-binary character in it. And that isn't to say that those books didn't exist, because they very much did, but they were hard to find. And growing up in Arizona, it wasn't like my, middle school or high school had like this huge LGBTQ plus literature section. So as much as we have a long ways to go in terms of diversity in children's publishing, especially with the book banning that's happening right now, it does bring me joy to see kids reading literature that reflects their identity and their culture or their experience much earlier than I did. So I think part of what draws me to working in literature is creating that experience for other people. It's really rewarding.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard so much about the book banning, and we're actually writing a blog about it. One of our interns is soon, so that's really exciting. It's crazy what's going on with the book banning.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I'm happy you guys are writing about it though, to bring awareness. A lot of people don't even know that it's happening unless you're like in the book community, right, or know somebody who is. So I love that you guys are writing about it.
Yeah, we have a lot of fantastic interns this
They are so amazing. I wish you could meet them all, Hannah. They are just shining stars.
I love to hear that. I love that.
Blog posts have really gotten a lot of great traction from so many amazing writers. But with all of those new interns, so many of them obviously would like to go into the publishing industry, but it can be pretty hard to get into. So do you have any advice for publishing hopefuls, or something that you wish that you could have heard before you got into the industry?
There's a lot of advice I've gotten, because I've done a lot of informational interviews too. So I've gotten a lot of advice from people, but I'll try to like condense it into what I think is most important. Obviously that'll depend on the specific person, what's most important to them. But I think something I wish that I knew, but I don't think I knew until I experienced it, which is that it's really hard to get into the industry, obviously. And you're going to hear a lot of people saying, just hold in there and your time will come. But it's kind of difficult to keep your chin up when, maybe you keep getting rejected, or when you get into the industry and it's different than you thought it would be. So I think it's important to let yourself feel those feelings, which are very reasonable, rather than kind of repressing them and kind of having this too positive attitude about it. Like, I think it's okay to say, this is really hard. So I think that's something important just for your own mental health, is to be able to say that to yourself. Like, it's okay that this is difficult. At the same time, I think what goes in tandem with that is that everyone is on their own timeline. So just because someone else gets a job right out of college and it's taking you a bit more time, doesn't mean that you're a less capable candidate in any way. It's just a very small and very competitive industry with many barriers to entry for a lot of people. So it can be hard. But just know that there's no rush to break in. You will break in. So I think when it comes to more practical advice, this is something that you probably heard a lot from a bunch of different people, but networking is your friend. Be sure to reach out to junior people specifically, not just senior people. Senior people definitely have amazing advice and they have the seasoned careers to back that up. But it's so important to have a network of people who will be at the same level as you when you go into the industry, because they're the ones who are going to be there with you in the proverbial like trenches. So I know it can be nerve-wracking to send those cold emails, but the worst thing that can happen is you don't get a response. And most of the time, industry people are very open to informational interviews. So don't be afraid to reach out and make those connections, because you never know. You could interview with somebody and then 6 months down the line, they're hiring, at their company. And all of a sudden, okay, now you have somebody that you can email and say, hey, I'm interviewing for this position, or I'm applying for this position. Do you have any tips? And that can be a really powerful way to get your foot in the door.
For sure.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, well, it's funny because as I'm hearing you talk about the publishing industry, something that I really struggled with when I was trying to learn more about the industry is kind of its amorphous presence. It's very mysterious to a lot of people, I think. And you mentioned before that you're working at an imprint. So for people who don't really know exactly what that is, could you briefly explain kind of the way that works, an imprint versus Macmillan as a whole, and your role as an editorial assistant versus an editor?
So I'll start at like the top down. So Macmillan is like the parent company. And then in Macmillan, we have Macmillan Learning, which is like the educational publishing, and then Macmillan Trade, which is like the fiction and the nonfiction, not the educational publishing. But then within Macmillan, I'm in Macmillan Trade, obviously. Within Macmillan Trade, you have that breaks down further. So an imprint of Macmillan Trade is Macmillan Children's Publishing Group. So that's all the kids' books that they're publishing. But within Macmillan Children's Publishing Group, there is another sub-imprint, multiple sub-imprints, one of which being the one that I work at with it, which is FSG Books for Young Readers, or Farrar Straus Giroux Books for Young Readers. So I'm kind of like, if you look at it like, I don't know, a family tree, I'm closer to the bottom. So it's like a small list of books that we're publishing as part of Macmillan Children's Publishing Group. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's kind of like a nesting egg almost. So I work on a small editorial team of, I believe, 8 people. So we're very small at FSG Books for Young Readers. And then the difference between like an editor and editorial assistant, it's just, a different hierarchy. So I work in more of like a support position to senior level editors. So I'm helping with their lists, their books that they're publishing. And if I, get promoted or start to acquire myself, then I'll continue to support them. Books for Young Readers, we're all being published under the same, logo. But we each have our own lists. Does that make any sense? Ask me, if I need to clarify anything, you can definitely tell me.
A pretty good explanation. It can just be very complicated, and I think that it's best to break down some of the mystery surrounding it so that it can be
definitely
successful. So
yeah, I think you did a good job. Sorry to interrupt. I'm like explaining the nesting egg. I think that's a really good analogy.
yeah.
I did have a question. You said that you were talking about like the differences between what you expect versus like the reality. Did you have any of those like epiphany moments where you're like, this is not at all what I was expecting when I landed the role versus like how it had actually like ended up?
I'll say that there's like the actual job of working in editorial, I think, is just obviously because I'd never done it before. I was surprised by a lot of the things. So that it requires a lot of public speaking, being an editor, that you do. Basically, my job is like 90% emailing people. I don't get to read all day. That's another big like kind of misconception, I guess, is I'm not just sitting at my desk reading all day. My bosses aren't sitting at their desks reading all day. And I think too, that like working with the creator is very collaborative, and it's a lot about just author care and not imposing like my idea of what I want this book to be onto the author, but helping them figure out what they want the book to be and then making that happen and asking questions toward that end goal, or trying to get to what the core of the story is about. And just being like the biggest champion of a book. Like that's what at least I see the job of an editor is. You're the person who's going to go to bat for this project. So that's why when you're acquiring something, you know, you really do have to love it, because you're going to be working on it for years and you're going to have to go to bat for it, you know, again and again. So you really do have to have that passion for it, as much as the author has that passion for it. You kind of have to meet them there. So yeah, again, though, it's just a process that I'm continually learning. I'm still demystifying publishing. I'm still learning things. The hierarchy is very confusing to me. I still don't understand what everybody does, or like when I have to email, when they're like, can you figure this out? I'm like, yeah, who do I email out of, you know, the entire team? I'm still kind of, you know, figuring that out as well. So you're not alone in feeling like, okay, but this industry is kind of confusing sometimes and I don't really understand it. Like same, I don't really understand it and I'm working in it. So
for sure. Yeah. It's tough for sure. We've had questions and the interns currently have a lot of questions, and it can be hard to find people with those types of answers. So hopefully some of your answers and your demystifying will help a little bit. But so, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but you were a film and television major at U of A?
I was. So I was completely not, you know, like I was studying English and creative writing as minors, but my major was film. And so I actually ended up really liking that, because my program at the U of A was a lot about producing. So I learned a lot about like how to pitch something, or like how to meld like the creative aspects of a project with the business aspects, you know, thinking about where does this fit into the market? How can I convince people, basically, how can I convince people to give me money to make this project a thing? Mm-hmm. I think that's also part of an editor's job. Like you have to be able to do that. That's what you're doing when you go to like an acquisitions meeting, is you're trying to convince these people to give you a big chunk of change to make this book. So that was part of like the curriculum that I learned at the U of A in my producing classes, which was, you know, obviously it was for film and TV, but the core of it still really applied. You know, just being able to get up and speak in front of a room full of people and hopefully persuade them to see that this project is as amazing as you think it is.
Yeah, for sure. So when you were doing your minor with English and creative writing, obviously you stumbled into Pine Reads Review. And how do you feel that experience interning at our little tiny publication, how do you think that assisted you in getting your job or in your role as you have it right now?
Well, it's tiny but mighty. I love Pine Reads. I don't want to embarrass her, but I will say that finding a mentor in Stephanie Piermain, who's the director of Pine Reads, I know you guys know that, but that was 100% my biggest takeaway from my experience. And it comes back to the support network that I was talking about and how important that is. I can't count the number of times that Stephanie or another mentor has given me, you know, some really important advice or has helped me find opportunities to grow my career. So when you find a mentor who truly believes in you and is willing to invest in you, I think that's a really special experience. And then I'd also say, again, a more practical thing is you guys are already building your industry skills through Pine Reads. You know, when you write a review, I don't know if you guys still do this, but when I was there, we had to write like original descriptive copy. Like we had to write the original like plot summary of the book when we reviewed something. So what you guys are doing essentially is you're writing copy, which is something I do all the time as an editorial assistant. Or maybe in your review, you describe a book as like These Violent Delights meets An Ember in the Ashes. Now you're coming up with comps. Like you're already doing things that you would be doing as an editorial assistant. So just using every opportunity that comes your way to build those skills, because you can, even if it's not directly related. I took an internship, a film internship with a production company over the summer while I was still searching for an internship in publishing. And obviously it has to do with film and TV and not books. But what I was doing for them is giving editorial feedback on scripts or on pitches. And I was meeting with creators and giving them feedback and talking to them. So I was kind of already building my editorial skills more and my interpersonal skills, even though it wasn't directly related to publishing. So you don't have to, have previous experience in publishing to continue to kind of grow your resume to make you like a competitive candidate when you do start applying, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think that is probably really good to hear for us both, but also for anybody who might be watching, because I think sometimes, at least in higher education, it seems like you definitely need a lot of higher degrees or you need plenty of experience. So it's good to hear that you can kind of connect a lot of your different skills to getting in the publishing industry, which is really cool.
Yes, definitely. And I know there is like a huge, focus on the higher education, but I'm a believer that, your experience comes from your experience. It doesn't come from a degree necessarily or, a job. It can come from any area of your life. So just, keep that in mind that, when, for instance, I worked at a bookstore and there I learned how to like manage people. Or I learned like how, what books kids were really interested in and stuff like that, or time management in college. Like it doesn't necessarily just have to come from a degree or a publishing program or something like that. Like it can come from elsewhere.
I really quickly, at a kind of a tangent, what do you think about some of the bigger publishing certificates offered by Columbia or NYU or the Denver Publishing Institute? Because I know they can be very controversial.
I mean, I haven't done one, so I feel like I can't really speak on them. I know people who have and who have really liked their experience. So yeah, I mean, I can't really speak on it because I haven't done it. But I do think we're starting to see in maybe specific companies that they're maybe expanding where they're getting their candidates from, because I know that those programs are great at like providing really qualified people, and that's amazing. But I think that companies are maybe starting to look elsewhere as well, just to make sure they're having like a diversity of thought. And also I know that can be a barrier to entry for a lot of people, that they can't go do, the Columbia course or the NYU course, like because it's expensive or because, for any number of reasons. So I hope that maybe becomes more of a resource and less of a requirement for people to work in publishing.
For sure. Yeah. On that note, what did you look for when you were looking for places to apply to get into publishing? Because as you mentioned, a lot of these houses kind of have some barriers to entry, and sometimes they can kind of have a certain type of person or a certain type of ideology that kind of is carried through. So what was really important to you when you were looking for places to work?
Well, I think that talking to other people who've worked there is really important. Because you have the people who are trying to hire you. Obviously, they're going to have a different view maybe of the company than somebody who has worked there before. So I think that's something that I was looking for, is in talking to other people who have worked for the publishing house or the imprint. What was their experience? I definitely didn't want to work somewhere where people hated coming to work. So I'm lucky that I'm not. That my experience has been really positive, and I'm on a really incredible team of people. Also, I was looking for something that was remote friendly. Hopefully, I'm not somebody who wants to move to New York, if at all possible. And that's still not guaranteed for me in my job that it's going to be remote friendly forever. But that was something when I was looking for an internship or a job, I was crossing my fingers and hoping that there would be that flexibility there, because it's very cost prohibitive, to move across the country. New York is very expensive. My family lives here. I know people have a bunch of different reasons why that's just not feasible to go and move. So I hope that becomes more of a mainstay in publishing, that people don't have to live there. And I think that will, help diversify publishing. Obviously, though, there's still New York has a very diverse population, and publishing still isn't as diverse as it could be. So I think it's not just the remote friendly, barrier there. There's obviously a lot more going on, but I do think that would help a lot.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Moving to New York is
Yeah.
not necessarily something I would like to do.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a great city, and I have if you love living there, that is amazing. And maybe I would like living there. I don't know. I've never lived there before. But at this time, I would prefer to live in Tucson. So
That's definitely understandable. But even though you can't live in New York and be right in it, you still have a lot of really positives of your remote job. And what would you think are some of your favorite parts of the job? And that's also kind of hard to talk about and obviously say as much as you can, but maybe pick a couple or 3 or 4 that are really some standouts to you that were exciting when you started this position.
Well, I think the one that stands out to me the most is the team of people that I'm working with. From my first meeting with all of them, I knew that it was just a really special group of people. It can be hard, like not everybody loves their coworkers, but I'm really lucky that I do. And I was doing an informational interview with an editor, and she gave me the best insight about this. And she said that as much as this is a business about getting books on shelves, if everybody has a terrible time doing that, then what's the point? And I think that that's something that's important to me is, having a positive experience with the people you're making the books with is so essential. Because, it's not who cares if the books makes it out into the world, because that does matter, but the work is only part of it. It's also who you're doing the work with. I think both of those in tandem are really important. So the people are who make my job really, really great. Obviously too, I love, I know it sounds nerdy, but I love pitching projects, coming up with how are we going to position this, and what comps do we want to use, and how can we write these sales points in a way that are going to be really appealing to everyone at the company. That stuff is really fun for me. I love reading submissions, and just that spark of a moment when you read something and you're like, wow, this is really good. I have to tell somebody about this because we need to jump on this. There's a couple projects right now that I'm, getting to help with, and I'm really excited to see them, kind of come through the entire process. Both because the creators are so amazing, but also because the stories are really amazing. So yeah, I think for all of those reasons and more, those are kind of my favorite parts of my editorial assistant position. I love my supervisors. They're both amazing. And I'm really not just saying that just to say that. I truly mean that they are great people. So yeah, I'm very lucky.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. So I unfortunately have a little bit of an internet kind of outage right now. So I'm gonna put my microphone off to try to keep the internet connection stable. So if Michaela, you wanna kind of take some of the other questions?
Yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure. No problem.
You're all good. You're all good.
Going off of that, you were talking about some projects that you're really excited about. Can you talk a little bit about the process of how a book starts and what it goes through? What kinds of steps does it need to go through to get onto the shelf?
Well, I think there's too many steps to talk about in this in
Right.
this interview. I think that's something that I quickly learned, is that it takes a long time to get a book from acquisitions to shelves. And as a reader, it was always very easy for me to be like, why isn't the next book in this series coming out for 2 years? I can't believe I have to wait that long. And now I think I realize that everybody is working super hard to get these books out into the world. And it's not that we're just keeping them from you because we want to be mischievous or something or petty. It's just that it takes a long time and a lot of work to get a book through the process. As an editorial assistant, I just started, so I've yet to be involved in the process from start to finish. But yeah, I mean, I think obviously it starts with just getting a submission from, an agent and really liking it. Maybe you take that to edit meeting, which is basically just the imprint editorial team. So just me and like the 8 other editors / editorial assistants. And we just kind of talk about, how do we feel about this? How would we position this? Et cetera, et cetera. If everyone likes it, you want to take it to acquisitions, then, every step is going to be paperwork. You're going to have to fill out paperwork for basically everything. But then you would take it to acquisitions meeting, and kind of feel, see how the higher ups respond to it. So you kind of have to get past that barrier. And then you can kind of jump more into the editing process itself. And then you kind of have the production process after that, making the physical book. And then finally, the book is out into the world. I was able to help co-line edit a middle grade novel as an intern. And that was really fun, to get to kind of dig in, and help do something more creative on more creative side. I think that was really exciting. And I'm just learning more about, how editing is a lot about author care and a lot about, like I said, that relationship between the editor and the creator. And it is very collaborative. And you're just, again, trying to find that core of what is this story about and how do we translate that, communicate that to the audience in the best way possible. But yeah, it's a really extensive process that I, again, still don't understand every single aspect of it and I'm still learning about. But I think it is kind of a learn as you go, learn by doing, that's how I'm at least treating it, is when I get to that next step for a project, okay, that's when I learn a little bit more about, like, okay, how do we deal with like the cover art, or how do we deal with, copy editing or something like that. I'm kind of taking it day by day, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally does. And kind of going off of that, like, what is a day in the life like at work? Like, what do you do from the time you start to the time you end?
It's different every day. So I definitely don't, like, no day is the same.
Yeah.
I could be, writing copy, I could be writing tip sheets, I could be emailing people, I could be sending books. Right now we're preparing for launch, which is kind of this triannual event where the different editorial teams pitch upcoming projects to the all departments. So that takes a lot of work. So it's kind of hectic right now, but hopefully in the next week or two, things will die down after we move on from our spring launch. But yeah, it really just depends, I think. And also editorial assistants differ. What your responsibilities are differ. So for instance, I'm the assistant for the editorial director for FSG Books for Young Readers. So I do a lot of like imprint wide stuff. So if anybody, from a different department needs to talk to FSG, they may email me. Or if there's something that has to be done for the whole imprint, I'll usually like take care of that. Versus another editorial assistant who's not, doing more imprint level stuff, more admin stuff. Maybe they're doing more editorial focused tasks. So I think editorial assistants, it differs based on where you're working and who you're working for.
That's really interesting that they have like it just depends on like which section of the company you're working at. I think the next if this is kind of a bigger question, like what are some of your goals like down the line? Like since you're new, you might have different things that it might change, but like what are your goals right now for the publishing industry, or if you want to stay or diverge into something else?
Well, I think that's a really good, what you said about like diverting is also really good advice. Is there's more than editorial. You don't have to work in editorial. I think that's something that I didn't necessarily know until I got my internship. Sorry if you can hear my dogs barking in the background. But there's so many other departments. You can work in school and library. You can work in marketing and publicity. Like there's a lot of options that you maybe like just don't know about. So when you do get an internship, maybe, you decide, hey, this isn't really like fit. This doesn't fit me. like my personality, but I really think that this other thing might. Like, don't be afraid to change your mind and go try that thing instead. Just, really just keep yourself in mind and what you like and don't like. I think that's really important, because it can be very editorial focused, but there's a lot more than that, that might fit you better. So in terms of goals specifically, I think I'm still figuring that out. I'm still in like the transition phase. Obviously, I'd like to, just continue to help on projects and build those relationships with creators. I think that's really exciting. And just getting to know more people at the company, and know like what they do. I really want to try to learn more about the different departments and try to understand how the whole system works, because I don't want to be too focused on just my job. I want to know how my job connects to other people's jobs. So I think that's something too, like in the immediate future, that I'm probably going to be trying to do some informational interviews as well, just like in my company. So yeah, I think learning more about the industry is a continual thing. It's not something that just ends when you get your first job. You're going to continue to learn, for your whole career, hopefully.
That's really awesome. I think that's all the questions we have, unless you want to add anything, Sophie.
Yes, my internet connection hopefully is now stable. I'm sorry about that. My apartment is
totally good.
Not the best apartment, but I did have one more question that I did want to ask you. So I've heard a lot about kind of the mental health toll that sometimes an editorial assistant role can take, and especially in the wake of kind of this publishing mass exodus that we kind of saw with Tor specifically. I'm kind of curious to see how you manage your own mental health with the workload. Presumably it is a lot, especially in your first position. So I'm curious to see how you kind of handle that and move forward with that.
Well, I think that it's more than just editorial. I think it's important to recognize that. It's a bunch of different departments. Obviously, I think on, social media specifically, we are seeing a lot of like junior level editors specifically leaving, but I do think it's a wider thing. Again, I'm really lucky that my team and my supervisors are very much about work-life balance. So, when I'm done for the day, I'm done for the day, and you just get the work done tomorrow. And I'm trying to hold myself to that. It's really hard when you have a long, kind of laundry list of things that you need to get done. And you're like, but I could just do that one more thing real quick and then I'll sign off. But, some advice that I've gotten is you do that now, and then later on down the line, it's going to take its toll on you because you didn't, just close your computer and stop working because you kind of formed a bad habit. Now, it's not just on the individual, because I think that sometimes can put it on like the editorial assistant or the person who's doing the work to just like, you just need to close your computer. And that's not, totally the whole issue, because it's a lot more complex than that. And I think that we need to see kind of the bigger system that's at play, and how these different departments may be understaffed and overworked. So it's definitely not just about, hey, well, you just need to be better about, work-life balance. But I do think that that's something that you can do as an individual, is try to set those boundaries for yourself as much as possible, and also advocating for yourself too. If you are overworked, going and saying to your manager or supervisor, like, I can't handle this workload. Again, that depends on having somebody who's willing to listen and really take your feedback and adjust and support you. So that may not happen for everybody. So again, it's such a complex issue, and it really depends on like the individual person. But for me, that's what I've been trying to do, at least.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a really good way to handle it. And I'm glad that you're able to kind of shut off at the end of the day and not have to work late into the night, because that certainly takes its toll after a while. I'm sure you can remember that as a student. I think college tend to
yes, definitely.
for overwork themselves. I know so many.
Yes.
Do. Yeah.
Your professor being like thinking that you're only taking the one class, I guess, like you're only taking their class. You don't have like 5, 6. Sometimes people are taking 8 classes a semester. Those people, I don't know. I don't know how they're alive. Like, I genuinely don't know. So kudos to them. I hope they're doing okay and taking some like self-care days. Because yes, the stress is definitely real for students. So I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves too.
Yeah, I think we'll get there, hopefully, at some point. But yeah, well, I think those were all of the main questions that we wanted to ask you. And thank you so much for talking with us today and all of your very insightful answers. I think it really helped to kind of give us a better idea about what publishing is like, and also just to hear about your individual experience in editorial, because, you know, that is kind of the popular department, I think, that a lot of people are really interested. So that was really, really great to hear. And thank you again for being so patient with all of my internet issues. I don't know.
You're fine. You don't need to apologize. You don't need to apologize. You like it. It's just a part of like working remotely. So you don't need to apologize at all. It's totally okay.
It's been so nice to talk to you and see that you're doing really well and that you found something that you really enjoy. It's so awesome. It gives us hope that there's things after graduation.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And this was really fun.